I tested positive in 1988, June 8th, 1988. At the time that I tested positive, I had really messed up my life. Like, people didn't talk to me. I didn't have anything. I got into sobriety with a purse, a dress, and a pair of shoes, and they were all stolen. And that is the only thing I owned to my name. And my parents had tried so hard to intervene and to support me, and they had cut me off, and my siblings had cut me off. And, as soon as I got into treatment, they were right there, because this was their greatest wish, is that I would stop trying to kill myself. So how it changed is, like, I was determined to stay sober. I thought, if I'm going to die, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to succeed at one thing. So my mom will be able to say she died sober. And then, of course, little by little, I was like, maybe I could get a little job, and, maybe I could have an apartment. And as what happens with people who get and stay sober and work a program of recovery is that your life gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I have thought about this question of, did I think I was going to die? I knew I was going to die, but humans don't live in that reality. And I don't think I did either. I could not drive 2 miles across the city without having severe diarrhea. I shat in every bathroom in the city because I could not hold my bowels. I was so very sick. I was going to bowling. I was living my life. I traveled, eating differently and exercising and going to therapy and doing everything I could to try to be, like, psychically, spiritually, and physically clean. When Crixivan or protease inhibitors and combination therapy was formally introduced, I got on it pretty quickly. And at that time, I had 0 T cells and a zillion opportunistic infections. And so my doctor said, like, what do you have to lose? Nothing. So let's just try this. There's really good research results, so give it a try. I kind of knew at that point, when I went from 0 T cells to 50 T cells to 150 to 500 to 1100, I think I'm not going to die. At least not. That's not what I'm not winding down. I now maybe need to wind up. And so that is why I'm sitting here today. And that was in 1996. We went through this horrible experience of being that was full of fear and uncertainty and loss and grief and, like, chronic and pervasive year after year. And so I think that does something to a person. I think it does something to your sense of safety in the world. My friend, one of my very good friends, got COVID, and I had a PTSD response that I wasn't even aware of. But I wasn't able to sleep. I felt I just felt sort of crushed emotionally, psychically, spiritually. I was so nervous, and I just kept feeling like I have to brace myself. All my friends are going to die. And I just don't know what to do. I don't know if I can do this again. And then I said it out loud. And when I said it out loud to a friend who was listening, she said, "It sounds like you're in the experience of living with HIV, and I don't think that's what's going to happen." People were organizing around AIDS in my consciousness from the very beginning. Like, I was in San Francisco. I wasn't exactly an advocate or an activist, or, I came out, when I came out as queer, it was like sort of in the feminist world. And so I had a feminist perspective, but I wasn't like wedded in the queer community in the way that I am now, and that HIV sort of drew me into because I was suddenly around a ton of gay men. And also the homophobia and the AIDS phobia was so intertwined that, it was so shocking. And it's also the dual sort of stigma of being an addict or an alcoholic and having HIV, or maybe the triple stigma and being gay. People were rude. The nurses were rude. The doctors were rude. There was so much cruelty. My activism was to help others stay sober and live with HIV. So it was very much on a personal, person-to-person level. Like, this is what you can do. Get healthy. Let's walk together. Let's bike together. Let's swim together. Let's go to workshops. Let's get in support groups. Let's stop smoking. Let's do the things that we can do. And let's learn about medication. Learn about your body. Learn about what medications you can take. Become a partner with your primary care provider instead of a passive patient. Become active in your own care. And that's what the epidemic taught all of us. But it really, I became very passionate about being involved in my own care. I think before HIV, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, the doctor was the expert. The patient did what the doctor told them to. There was that very paternalistic, mostly the man is the doctor, and he tells you what to do and you do it. And so when AIDS came around and there were many more questions than there were answers. And I think cancer has also been involved in this kind of, you're the patient, this is your decision, here's the information. Like, you're offering me experimental medications. I get to have a choice of whether I take that or not. But really, I never heard of such a thing until HIV/AIDS. Let us be in charge of, control. Everything was out of control. So give the patient some control, especially when the stakes are so high. The stakes were so high. Do this or don't do this, you're going to die. So you get to choose. I remember taking my drawing pad and my art supply box to classes at City College, parking, walking, and being exhausted. And I did that in that way that you just keep living your life. You just keep living your life. You keep coping with how it is, but you just keep moving forward. And I think that is very much what art is to me. It's life-affirming. It's doing something that every part of society and of my own self-knowledge or my self-talk says, you can't do this. You shouldn't. Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to think you can make art? And then you have to fight that. You have to say, I have an urge and I'm going to honor that urge. I have a desire to do this and I'm going to listen to that sort of life force. And then all the noise that says, who do you think you are? I'm going to try to ignore. And I think that is an act of activism. It's like life-affirming activism. Getting older as a person living with HIV is bizarre. And it is the one place where I think the most about, I was supposed to die. HIV was one place I was supposed to die. So as an injection drug user who lived on the streets, who hustled and was in a lot of violent situations, who overdosed, there were a lot of times that I was supposed to die. So the fact that I am 64 years old and facing aging, I retired, that's bonkers. And I think I suffer from, feeling bad about getting old. And I often say, this is such a privilege. This is so great. It is fine. My wrinkly skin and my saggy parts and my aches and pains are badges of honor. And it is hard to live in the joy of that, And I will say that, like, the other thing HIV taught me is don't do this alone. Don't have your periods of sorrow or depression or low self-esteem. Don't do that alone. Reach out to another person and be in community in your pain as well as in your joy, and then you have a much richer and fuller life.